Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Championship Game Preview Podcast. I'm Josh Welge here with Steve Soucie. We're joined today by Russ Hodges, who covers the CCL for us. Guys, how are we doing?
Not too bad. Looking forward to a good weekend of state finals.
Walked outside this morning and my wicker furniture didn't blow away with these gusty winds, so that's a good start to the day.
Yeah. No, I was outside for about 5 minutes. I got a 2-year-old that loves the wind, and I'm like, I'm going to give you 5 minutes of yard time, and then we're going right back in because it's a little bit chilly out there today. But should be a lot of fun this weekend. Potential snow on Saturday, so we'll see how that goes. But we're going to kind of break down, all 8 finals on this show. But first of all, I was thinking about that snow. Soucie, you've been doing this, I'm just going to say it, longer than either of us here. You were calling it any memorable snow final type situations?
There have been about 3 that I can think of that have had at least snow. I would say I would put it at 5 to 10 that would be classified as blistering cold. But as far as like the snow that's being possibly anticipated for, I believe, the window for the 5A game, I'm not sure I've seen a final quite like that before. If that does end up materializing where there could be, 3 to 6 inches of snow falling right pocket in that window. There hasn't been really one that I remember in the time that I've been doing this. I've gone to finals, I think, almost every year for the last 30 years, and I can't remember anything like that.
Yeah. I don't know. Russ, have you ever covered any big snow games in your years doing this? Maybe not even stayed, just.
When I worked out in Rochelle, I think back to 2022, there was a state quarterfinal game between the Hubs and St. Francis where the snow was starting to come down. Not extremely heavy, but enough to where it was a memorable experience. And then I think as a fan, going back to I think it may have been 2019 or 2018 when St. Charles North and Mount Carmel played in St. Charles.
Oh yeah.
St. Charles North being my alma mater, I was there with my brother and my parents, and that was an unbelievable game. I believe it was an overtime game. Tyler Newbin on that St. Charles North team, knocking off Mount Carmel to make it to, I believe, their first ever state championship in football. So
yes,
that's one that stands out to me for sure.
Yes, that was definitely the Tyler Newbin game. That was definitely the Tyler Newbin year for St. Charles North. So, yeah, a lot of good stuff. So we'll see what happens. I'm kind of, there's that sinister side of me that likes a little chaos, a little snow, but we'll see what it brings on Saturday. So yeah, let's kind of break it down. The 8 games, kind of working our way back, working our way up. That 1A matchup. Soucie, Wivick, and the NUIC, as expected, meeting. Lena Winslow, no stranger here. They're fifth in a row. Brown County, I feel like they've been adopted as one of your teams, and I really like their coach. I believe Tom Little's his name. At the media call on Monday, talking about how he had a ticket for last year's game that he's been looking at every year or every day since that time, and he got quite emotional talking about it. So it's really a great story, Brown County getting here, and now we'll see. I think they've really been riding that opportunistic train here, forcing turnovers and playing opportunistic football, and probably going to need to do it against Lena Winslow.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the situation with the NUIC and the Wivick, and pretty much everybody expected, especially now with kind of the elephant in the room from last year, Belleville Altoff moving up several classes and not quite being as talented as they were last year. It was kind of what everyone anticipated, but to be completely honest with you, Lena, you can understand it. This is actually the 6th state championship game appearance in a row for them. Although they have lost the last 2, but 6 in a row for them, so they're very accustomed to being here. But a lot of people were wondering whether or not they would get back because of the loss to Stockton, avenging that loss in the semifinals. But you look at Brown County, I mean, if you had people lining up the order of the Wivick teams at the beginning of the year, I think the most optimistic of people would have said they're maybe the 3rd best team in that conference, behind Camp Point Central, and Calhoun. Well, Brown County lost to both of those teams in the regular season, managed to do something very rare. They lost 2 games in the regular season, avenged both of those 2 losses in the postseason with wins over Camp Point Central and Calhoun. So Brown County is one of those teams that you look at it and you look at the way that they've gone through this postseason. They have picked the absolute opportune time to play their best football, because that's what they're doing right now.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I will say what Lena did last week against Stockton, a team that beat them earlier in the year, the fact that they beat them and the manner in which they beat them, it sounded like they really dominated that game. Boy, I think it puts them in a position that they're the clear favorite in this game, I would say, with respect to Brown County and what they've been able to do. I give them a puncher's chance what they've been able to do in the playoffs.
Yeah, you just kind of look at it, and this is one of those situations. You got a first-time finalist against a team that has taken up residence in the state championship game, and I don't care, like what people say about, it doesn't matter that much. In this situation, I think it matters a lot. You've got a two small school programs. A lot of these kids for Lena have played in 2, sometimes 3 previous state championship games. They understand the specter of that. They've been through it. They know what they have to do. Brown County, last week was the first time they'd ever played in a semifinal game. So you're looking at, a team that, sometimes you can rise up and put all that stuff behind you, but it definitely gives, I think, Lena an advantage. And I do think that that's a Lena team that, I guess, kind of, in my opinion, kind of got a little bit underrated over the course of the season because of that early loss to Stockton. I think this is a very good football team. Yeah,
I think that happens a lot. When a team takes an early loss, you're like, maybe they're not quite, what they've been, what we've traditionally thought of them to be. They've proven to be every bit of as good as they usually are. So we move into 2A and a team that took a loss early in the year, Wilmington. Haven't done a lot of that lately. They've really been on a roll. Now they get Maroa Forsyth, 2 programs, a lot of familiarity with the state finals. Soucie, Wilmington about as well as anybody. What makes this Wilmington team special? I know you've talked about it before.
I went to the semifinal game on Saturday night, and it was the first time all season that I'd been able to see them live. I was actually just kind of watching the game in attendance. I wasn't working the game per se. So it gave me the opportunity to do some things that maybe I wouldn't be able to do when I was working. So one of the things that I wanted to do, for example, is I went down on the end zone line and looked at the play from the line of scrimmage when they were on offense. And I'm like, I want to see if I can figure out what makes this so difficult to try to stop. Because it looks, from the sideline, it looks like, well, why don't you just do this? So I went and I looked, and they are so good at deceiving and not showing you where the football is. So there were times when I could not find the football. I did not know where it was, and I was not being blocked by anyone or trying to tackle anyone, and I couldn't find the football. So I'm understanding now from, and I've understood this for years. I've looked at it like this before, but Wilmington, for all of its credit and all the program that it's done over years and years and years, I honestly feel like this might not be the most talented team Wilmington's ever had, but I think they're doing the best job of running what Wilmington does. Just schematically, they're so fluid. They make so few mistakes, and their kids make great adjustments.
I don't know. You have to go back through the history books and the record books, but if they complete the run they've had in a manner they've done, this is going to be one of the more dominant playoff runs that I can remember. They've just rolled everybody. Yeah, there are very few teams that I think I can look back in history. I know there have been a few, so I'm not going to say it's the only time that this has ever happened, but there are very few football teams out there that I can think of that have running clocked every opponent that they've played in the postseason, and running clock most of the teams they played in the regular season. Obviously, they have that week 1 loss to Morris on the ledger, but it's very rare that you go into a situation, even as a good football team, and feel like you don't have much of a chance. And that's what it feels like every time Wilmington hits the field, especially over the last couple of weeks. And the thing is, Maroa Forsyth, there is a history. They've been to the finals quite a bit, but it's not always a great history. I mean, last year, Chicago Christian beat them quite handily. Wilmington's a tough test as well. Interesting. These two teams, and I know they're both familiar to say, but very different teams. I mean, you look at Maroa. I mean, they pass and they run a pretty equal amount. I think they have more passing yards than running yards. And I think I saw in your preview, I think Wilmington's attempted 4 passes this year.
Yeah, that's correct. They completed 3 of them, so they're highly effective. But right when it comes down to it, you are looking at at 2 very, very different teams. And in terms of Maroa, I think the interesting side story on them is one of their best players, Zach Smith, sat out the semifinal game against Arthur. They were still able to win that game. He's very important to them. I mean, he's got to be on the field and effective for Maroa Forsyth to have a chance in this game, to be completely honest with you. Because the thing that people look at, they're like, oh, Maroa throws it. Wilmington doesn't see a lot of teams that throw it. Well, if they do, I mean, last week, El Paso is a pretty competent passing team, and Wilmington gets so much pressure on the quarterback. The secondary is better than people think. It's still going to be a problem to throw against this Wilmington team. It just is. So, and if they don't have their best offensive weapon on the field, I know their quarterback is a very good thrower and runner, but in order for them to be max effectiveness, they've got to have both Shepard and Smith on the field. And if that doesn't happen, I don't think the odds are very high for Maroa to win this game. But if he's not on the field, I think they go even lower.
Moving on to 3A, again, teams that are no strangers to say, Byron and Tolona Unity. Honestly, they're teams that I think are pretty familiar with it. They've seen each other at least once or twice, I think, at state. But Soucie, there's another one where, I mean, we've talked about it. You've talked about it with Matt on Rodewall and on your podcast with the idea of the North and South rather than 1 through 32. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what comes out of this. I kind of feel like, depending on the result of this game, maybe there's a rethinking of the 1 through 32, because I think there's a clear North and South gap.
Oh, there is, and I think it might even be a little bit more defined in 3A than it's been in a while, because Byron a couple of years ago had that team that just steamrolled everybody, but at least along the way, they had a couple of fights in that northern bracket. I thought they were going to have some of those fights, but they took care of IC Catholic pretty easily, and they dominated Richmond Burton last week, especially in the second half. And I thought both of those games, at the very least, were going to be a little bit more competitive than they were. And I thought there might be a little bit of danger for Byron to maybe even lose those games. Nope. This is a really, really good Byron football team. I know we've been saying this for a while, but with Caden Considine doing the things that he does on a weekly basis on both sides of the football, they have very savvy quarterback play. He understands how to run this offense. Andrew Talbert, more known as a baseball player, he's a North Carolina commit for baseball, but he just runs that offense and engineers things and is athletic enough to make plays if something does go wrong. So this is a very, very good Byron team. One of their better units, maybe not quite as good as the team that scored, I may be exaggerating here, approximately 8 million points a few years ago, but it's a very, very good version of the Byron Tigers, which is pretty much the same thing every year. You know what you're going to get. They're like Wilmington in that sense, where, they let you know this is what we're going to do and almost dare you to stop it, and nobody can. So that's one of the situations. Tolono, a really interesting story, kind of underlying with them. This is the first year for their coach, Tony Reitz, at the helm, longtime assistant of Tolono coach Scott Hamilton, who had been at the school for 30 plus years running the football program, had a lot of success. Reitz came in, guides them to state final. Interesting side story that I didn't actually know until he unveiled it during the coaches' calls. Went through a very complicated surgery on his brain shortly after being hired as the head coach of the Tolono Unity football program. So, get hired for get hired for a football job, let the people know involved that, hey, oh yeah, a couple days I'm going in for comprehensive brain surgery. So a heck of a story there, just on the, kind of away from the field, that he was able to kind of keep that program's continuity going with all that was going on in his personal life.
No doubt. I'm looking forward to seeing Caden Constantine play again live too. I haven't had a chance to see him play in a year. I got to see him play last year in that Montini game, but he's a kid that, I mean, a lot of times in these 1A, 2A, 3A games, you get a lot of really great players, but maybe kids that aren't going to play so much at next level. I don't think he's committed yet, but I definitely think we're going to be seeing Caden Constantine play on Saturdays. I know his dad, Sean, played at Iowa, then he played in the NFL, and now he's on the staff with Jeff Boyer. Used to be Bayern's quarterback a long, long time ago, and I got to see him play. But, man, Caden Constantine's one of the more special running backs in the state.
Oh, absolutely. Just a real talent. And, you get that kind of unique blend a lot at the lower levels classification. You got guys that are two-way players, and usually you can kind of define, well, which side of the football is he better served to play? I'm not sure I can answer that question with him. He's very effective on both sides of the ball and does such a great job. Probably ends up on the defensive side of the ball at the next level, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up doing the things that he's doing offensively now, because that's just the kind of player that he is. And he has been for a long time. I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like he's been in high school forever, and that's not really the case, because he immediately, as a freshman, burst on the scene and was immediately doing big things.
Oh yeah, no, I remember watching him play as a freshman against IC Catholic in the semifinals and thinking, this kid's going to be great, because he already is, is very good, and he is. So, so that's 3A. Moving on to the 4A game, again, teams, very familiar with being at state with Montini and Rochester. It's coincidentally enough, guys, Montini and Rochester, Montini coach Mike Bukowski said, never seen each other in the football field. I mean, usually you'd see maybe cross paths. I know they're sort of like in different classes sometimes, but interesting that these programs have never seen each other before.
Yeah, it's an enrollment dance that they've kind of done around one another, because Montini, when they were down in enrollment, they actually didn't make the playoffs. So there were opportunities where they would not have met, obviously, in that situation. But for a while, Rochester was dancing between 4 and 5A. Montini was doing the same. It seemed like whenever they both made playoff runs, they were in different classes. But it does seem kind of odd that two programs with so much postseason success under their belts wouldn't have ran into each other at least once, like along the path. I mean, that it definitely seems like it's something that should have happened.
So Montini quarterback Izzy Abrams is on the short list of guys that I'm looking forward to seeing play this weekend. I got to see him play last year, haven't this year. 3,600 so yards, 36 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 9 rushing touchdowns. Pretty good year for that young man. Russ, what about that Montini team impresses you the most?
Yeah, what a year it's been for Montini. They've won 23 games in a row. They have not lost a football game in over 14 months, looking for back-to-back state championships after winning it in 3A last year. They have big players on both sides of the ball. Defensively, Santino, Tenuta, Laddie Ase, a kid who I had the chance to talk with one-on-one earlier this year, who tore his ACL, didn't play last year, was along for the ride when they won that state championship. And one thing he told me was, I didn't touch the trophy. He might have a chance to potentially touch the trophy this weekend, but defensively they have kids that can tackle. And offensively, as you mentioned with Izzy Abrams, he's right up there with Trey Taylor at Carmel, as arguably the best quarterback in the state. They have playmakers at wide receiver like Luca Florio and Demasio Ortegon. Isaac Alexander at running back has been real steady for them this year. And you guys mentioned Montini and Rochester not meeting up on the football field, but interestingly enough, when I spoke with Coach Bukowski, one thing he mentioned to me was Rochester's coach, Derek Leonard, his father, Ken Leonard, who from my research is a legendary coach at Sacred Heart Griffin. Mike told me that they had some battles several years back. So I know Mike has a tremendous amount of respect for Rochester's program. And these are two teams that are similar in quite a few ways. They both put up a heck of a lot of points. Montini has scored over 500 points this year. Rochester has scored over 600 points. both of these teams have come up big in key moments throughout the season. I believe Rochester has won 2 overtime games in these playoffs, and Montini, you go back all the way to week 1 against Lumen Christi, winning that game. They won a close game against Fenwick. They won a close game against Carmel and Marist as well. So both of these teams are battle tested. And then you look at their state playoff, state championship pedigree. Rochester, I think in the last decade, has won 4 state championships, and they've beaten some Catholic League teams to do it. Just 2 years ago, they beat St. Lawrence to win a state championship. And I believe 2019, they knocked off St. Rita to win a 5A championship. So I'm really excited to watch this game. This will be the last game of the Friday slate. And I don't think there's going to be a bunch of snow falling Friday night. So I think there is a good chance that both of these teams could be putting up a lot of points. I could see both of these teams going into the 30s, possibly over the 40s in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm quite confident that there is going to be points scored in this game. Souce, Russ mentioned Rochester's history. I think Derek Leonard, I read this is his 21st year, and he's won 9 state championships, which is pretty good percentages there. This year's team, Russ mentioned Montini had some tests early. They really have not been tested a whole lot the last 5 or 6 weeks. Rochester, on the other hand, some close calls the last couple of weeks. What do you make of this matchup from a Rochester's perspective? I think they can put up the points. I just don't know if they can slow down that Montini offense.
I'm interested in that too in a lot of ways. I think as far as you can go in terms of innovative and trying to do creative things, I don't think you can find someone that is more inclined to that than Rochester coach Derek Leonard. He will do whatever he has to do, especially from an offensive perspective. He will throw the kitchen sink at Montini. He will come up with whatever he can to try to give his kids even the slightest bit of an edge. But my concern for Rochester in terms of competing in this game is I don't know if they have an answer for Montini defensively. I think they will score points in this game. I don't know if it'll turn into a classic shootout, but my concern for Rochester is whether or not they can rein in Montini enough to make it a let's trade scores game, or is Rochester just scoring enough to keep it in the realm of possibility?
Yeah. I think we're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, come back and talk about games 5A through 8A.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike. With dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country, we meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Back on the Friday Night Drive Championship Game Preview Podcast, turn attention to Saturday's games. A couple CCL rematches in both 5A and in 7A. We'll start with 5A, St. Francis and Providence, a rematch of a Week 5 game, I believe. St. Francis won 47-35. Russ, you were there for that game. What were your impressions from that game, and how do you feel maybe Providence is a different team than they were at the time?
Yeah, I think both teams have really evolved since that time. I was on hand, as you mentioned, for that game, and it was two contrasting styles offensively when You look at St. Francis, a team that typically airs it out and hits on big pass plays. They did so in this game. Brock Phillip threw 4 touchdown passes to Dario Milivojevic. Zach Washington had a big special teams play as well. They had over 400 yards of offense. But at the same time, Providence was able to move the ball really well on the ground with Broden and Braid McKay, their top 2 running backs, who both had really good performances in this game. Just a couple of there was a special teams play early in that game, a bad snap on a punt for Providence that put St. Francis at the 1-yard line. They scored a touchdown there, and then allowing the return touchdown to Zach Washington. Those were 2 pivotal plays in that game for St. Francis. But looking at the rematch, I think Providence has really started to find some rhythm in the passing game. Dom Vita, their sophomore quarterback, is starting to get comfortable. They're opening up the playbook a little bit more. And as for St. Francis, they've really been able to run the ball well over the last several weeks. Tobias Caldwell has put up some big games for them. And St. Francis has knocked off some pretty good 5A opponents in these playoffs with Morgan Park and Prairie Ridge. And Providence is a team that has a wealth of state playoff, state championship experience, not just in football, but in other sports too. But for the football program, this will be their 15th time playing in the state finals, looking for an 11th state championship. St. Francis looking for its first state championship since I believe 2008. So for the Spartans, they had made the semifinals the last 3 years, had lost in those games, but finally able to break through. Now you have the challenge of, can you beat the same team twice, which Mount Carmel was able to do that in weeks 9 and 10 against the 3-time defending 8A champions Loyola. Can St. Francis do that? And can St. Francis do that on a Saturday where, as we mentioned, there could be a lot of snow falling from the sky?
You were reading my mind, Russ. I was going to go there because I mean, if the weatherman Soucie can be believed, off the top for a podcast, 5-8 could be where we get some snow action. And St. Francis, they have shown they can run with Tavius Caldwell. I like him a lot as a running back, but they do like to pass the ball. You know, Providence, on the other hand, I think I read in Soucie's preview, they've run for the most rushing yards, their second most in school history, and they have not lost a fumble all year, which is remarkable. So I'm interested to see, Soucie, what the snow dynamic, if it happens, presents for this game.
Yeah, I am as well. And I mean, I've seen Providence 2 out of the last 4 weeks in the playoffs. I saw them in their second round win over Kankakee, and I saw them in their semifinal win over Oak Forest on Saturday. And the one thing that kind of struck me about them, seeing them on the field, was they will have stretches, and it depends on how long these stretches go, where I questioned how Providence ever lost a game. They will also have stretches where I'm like, what is going on here? So for me, it's how they balance those scales. Are they able to kind of eliminate those pockets where it's like, I don't know what they're doing? They got up pretty sloppy in the fourth quarter of that game against Oak Forest. They had the game in hand, but what happens in a close game? If this is a close game, can they either really, really tamp down those pockets of where it's like they're making mistakes, picking up penalty flags, not playing the cleanest brand of football, and enhance those times where it looks like they can defeat anybody you put on the other side of them? Because when they're playing at that level, it is very impressive. They are a very impressive football team. It's just whether or not how close they can get to sustaining that level of effort for 48 minutes. I think that's the biggest pivot for Providence in this game. But, you know, like we just been talking about, I think the wild card for both of these teams is what conditions are we looking at? I would say, just kind of looking at the two teams on paper, that kind of game would favor Providence. Just in the fact that it might be just we got to play smash mouth football to move it. And I think Providence can do that very well when they're playing the way they want to.
Yeah, I do with St. Francis. I do have a bit of a concern. You know, their offense has been putting up points all year. Collection receivers as good as anyone out there. I mean, they have struggled to stop teams from time to time. I know. I know Coach McMillan doesn't like hearing about that. Sometimes he addressed his defense on the media call the other day. They have stepped up. defensively in the playoffs from a turnover perspective. They forced a key one in that game against Prairie Ridge. They forced a bunch last week against Belvedere North. Can they maybe do that, or can they just plain stop people? We'll see. It's obviously a fascinating matchup.
Yeah, absolutely, no question. It's the one that I think on paper, my expectation is for it to be possibly the most competitive of the weekend's games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then add the snow dynamic, and it gets a little crazy. So we'll see. Turn our attention to Class 6A. Soucie, East St. Louis. You've said it before. The most deceiving 3-loss team, maybe that you've seen in a long, long time. They go up against Fenwick. That Russ, you were there last Saturday. I was there for a while as well. I'm just going to say East St. Louis is definitely the favorite in this game. But the way Fenwick has competed against upper echelon teams, Mount Carmel, they took them to the wire. They beat Nazareth. Montini was a 2-point conversion game. I mean, Fenwick's got to have confidence based off of that, but this is definitely an uphill climb for them.
Oh, definitely. You look at East St. Louis, and they always kind of enter the state finals, unless you've seen them a couple of times during the playoffs, a little bit under, the guise of mystery. Like, we know these guys are good, but how good are they? And I've watched a lot of them on tape. I have not seen them live this year. What I've seen of Myson Johnson Cook is maybe one of the better running backs they've ever had. And that is saying something. They just have this propensity to break a big play. It might get called back by a penalty, so they'll adjust the play slightly, run basically the same play, and then score on the next play. That sounds ridiculous, but I've seen it happen so many times that it's just a pattern of things. They're just so gifted, especially on the outside. An army of wide receivers that can make a play for them. We're not that far removed from Luther Burden, who is now playing from the Bears on Sunday. They don't have a receiver at Burden's level. Few do ever, but they have guys like that can make plays. And the problem for opposing defenses is there isn't one of them. There isn't two of them. There's maybe not even three of them. There might be five of them. So it makes it almost impossible for defenses to place keys on players. If the quarterbacks are making the correct decisions on where the balls go, that offense becomes almost impossible to stop. So, and that being said, I really, really like the way Fenwick is playing right now. I've noticed it over the course of the second half of the season. In the playoffs, they've done a really, really nice job of, barring the semifinal last week, which they obviously had to sweat out. But prior to that, they were dismantling teams on their way into that semifinal game and doing very much the same what East St. Louis was doing, putting teams away early, giving them no hope, and then just kind of rolling into the back end of the win. So something has to be said for that. And like I said, East St. Louis has had some tricky games here in the final. And if Fenwick can hang around and frustrate them a little bit, you never know what might happen.
Yeah, to touch on something Sue said regarding my son Johnson Cook, he's not only one of the best running backs in the state, but you look at him as a national prospect. He's one of the top prospects in the entire country. And I was surprised to see the result of the game against St. Lawrence, a St. Lawrence team that has played well throughout the playoffs, and to see a 50-7 score, I was quite surprised to see that. I know East St. Louis plays a national schedule. They play some of the top high school programs in the entire country, but to just completely dismantle a quality CCL program like St. Francis was pretty raised an eyebrow for me. But for Fenwick, Josh, as you mentioned, we were at that game against Nazareth. First of all, what a fun game that was. A sold out crowd. I want to say about 5,000 people maybe were there. There were folks sitting on rooftops outside of the stadium watching that game. And I think for Fenwick, again, depending on the weather, if it's going to be snowing a lot, Fenwick can run the ball. Tommy Teese and Jake Teese, the two brothers who are both two-way standouts for Fenwick, have been their go-to players all season. Jake Teese had a monster game against Nazareth. He had over 100 rushing yards and over 100 receiving yards. It seemed like in points throughout that game against Nazareth, where maybe the Roadrunners have an opportunity to take over momentum and really put the clamps down. Fenwick's defense came up with big plays. They score in overtime. They get the stop on the 2-point conversion. Jake Teese was one of the players who was in on that tackle at the end of that game. They have players like Michael Murphy on defense, and Jamin Williams, the quarterback. He may only be 5'8", 5'9", but he makes big plays for them in the passing game. Fenwick is really good with that screen game and that quick passing game, getting the ball outside to players like Raphael Stewart, or just getting the ball into the hands of one of the Teese boys and letting them run with it. So as you guys mentioned, I'd imagine a lot of people will pick East St. Louis to win this game, but don't count Fenwick out in this game. This team won a state championship, I believe, 4 years ago. The last time Nazareth lost in the playoffs prior to this past weekend was in 2021 when they lost to Fenwick, and that was the year Fenwick won the state championship. So should be a really fun game to watch.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Jake Thies is having as good of a playoff run as anybody the last few weeks. And Jamin Williams, you mentioned his height. Man, when I first saw him, I'm like, is this Jamin Williams? Is this their starting quarterback? And then he started just dropping dimes from 30 yards. I'm like, yeah, that's Jamin Williams. So, I mean, he really, really talented quarterback for Fenwick. Looking forward to that one as well. Turn our attention to Class 7A, another rematch. Brother Rice, St. Rita, I believe it was week 2. Brother Rice beat him 28-2 or 20-10 rather. But Russ, you know, with respect to Brother Rice, they've been dominant all year long. Savor that Mount Carmel loss. You know, St. Rita didn't have Stephen Armbruster in that game, their starting quarterback. They also didn't have their number 1 receiver in that game. So I put a little bit of an asterisk by that first result. I still think Brother Rice is the favorite in this game, but I do have pause. And then what St. Rita did to Batavia last week, wow, that was an eye-opener. That was one of the eye-opening results from last week.
Yeah, for St. Rita, I'm really interested to see them play because I haven't seen them since week 2. Is actually they played Mount Carmel week 2. They played Brother Rice week 3, but I watched their game against Marist in week 1, a game that went down to the final seconds of the fourth quarter. Brandon Johnson Jr., their starting running back, scores a touchdown. They win that game. I haven't seen them in about 2 to 2.5 months. And at one point in the season, St. Rita was 2-4. There was a question of whether or not they would even make the playoffs. And they had some injuries, as you mentioned. Armbruster missed a little time earlier in the season. Walter Jones, one of their stud receivers, missed a little bit of time. But talking to Martin Hopkins, their head coach, over the last several weeks, they've really started to get healthy and they've really committed to running the ball. And you saw that toward the end of the regular season. They beat IC Catholic in week 9 to finish 5-4, get to the playoffs. And when I looked at that bracket, I thought if they could get past Lincoln Way Central in the second round, there is certainly a path for them to get to the state championship. And they beat Lincoln Way Central on a walk-off field goal by Saul Ruiz. And from that point on, it's back-to-back 50-point games. And it hasn't just been running the football either. They have hit on multiple big passing plays, and it's the reason why they put up 56 points against Hersey and 54 points against Batavia in the semifinal. So I'm excited to watch St. Rita. And then for Brother Rice, they've been the AP's number 1 ranked 7A team for practically the entire season. If it weren't for Mount Carmel, they would likely be undefeated at this point. They've just been dominating everybody in these playoffs, 57-0 and 46-0 over Jefferson and Jacobs in the first 2 rounds. And St. Charles North, Downers Grove North, 2 of the better public school programs in 7A with Division I players like Keaton Reinke for North and Owen Lansu for Downers Grove. Brother Rice wins those 2 games, 42-18. I was on hand for that game, and then 45-17 over Downers Grove North. So this team is just dominating. They run the football as well with Jamison Davis and Jalen Green, their 2 running backs. They rotate in and out. CJ Gray, their quarterback, is an Army recruit. He's got a good arm, and he's able to keep the ball himself and make big plays in the run game. So they really have 3 players that could go for over 100 yards on the ground in a game. And then defensively, I think we've talked about it on the podcast before, but their defensive line is, in my opinion, the best in the state. Between King Liggins, the Illinois recruit at D-tackle, Braden Parks, who's a 4-star prospect, Cameron McGee might be the best defensive player in the state, and he's only a sophomore. He's a game breaker at that defensive end edge rushing position, whether he's sacking the quarterback, deflecting passes, forcing fumbles. that St. Charles North game, they were double teaming him on almost every play, and he was still finding ways to put pressure on the quarterback. So we're kind of beating the dead horse here, but with the weather and if it's snowing and these two teams are running the ball a lot, can St. Rita move the ball against this defense and specifically this defensive line? That's going to be a big challenge.
And the other thing too, I mean, I know people get exhausted with CCL talk and there's been enough discussion about that. There'll be a lot of it this week, but in all seriousness, this is a big game. These are two schools that are separated by like 4 miles in the south side of Chicago. And there's a lot of alum. This is a meaningful game, not just for state, but by two programs, Soucie, that, know each other quite well. And then Russ mentioned it too. I mean, to me, the interesting matchup is St. Rita's offense has been tremendous lately. They have a veteran quarterback, Stephen Armbruster. They have a very good running back. Brother Rice defense is so darn good. I mean, that's the matchup that really is what I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, this is a layered game in a lot of ways. I mean, you mentioned it before, St. Rita missing some key components in that first game between the two schools, but man, it just really feels like this Brother Rice team has really put all the pieces of the puzzle together here. And for them, it is just a matter of finishing the job at this point in time. I think they're the favorite in this game. I have been surprised with, I guess, the next level that St. Rita has taken this to. I was looking at them, I was kind of overviewing their team, kind of looking at the situation. I can't help but look back to week 8 when I was heading into week 9, wondering whether or not St. Rita would win that game against IC Catholic. And knowing in the back of my head that even if they didn't win that game against IC Catholic, they would probably get in as a 4-5 team. But also thinking in my head, even if they win, they're probably going to end up around 24, 25, 26 seed. And that's going to be terrorizing for somebody in the first round of the playoffs. If they didn't win, they were going to be the 32 seed in the 7A bracket. So imagine being the top seed and looking and seeing that St. Rita team coming at you in the first round. But for them to do what they've done now has been a real surprise, including the last 2 weeks with the 50-plus point teams. Games. I recognize that they're a good football team, but I didn't know they had this offensive bullet in their gun, if you would. So I'm interested to see if they can keep at least some of that momentum going into this game, but it's going to be a problem against that Brother Rice defense. I'm really looking forward to seeing Cameron McGee live for the first time because I have not seen that yet. So that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to seeing from an individual player basis.
Turn our attention to Class 8A. I'm just going to say it, Mount Carmel Oswego. Guys, when I was leaving Ken Pickrell Stadium Saturday night, I was going, Mount Carmel Oswego. Is this real life? Is this really happening? I just not. I mean, it's just been an amazing run for Oswego to be able to get to where they are. But I'll start with Mount Carmel's Russ. I mean, my goodness, that game that Soucie was at, the Lincoln Way East game, was like, wow. I don't even know what to say about that. But talk about this Mount Carmel team a little bit.
Yeah, you talk about making a statement. I mentioned earlier beating Loyola in back-to-back weeks. Mount Carmel, of course, is the 3-time defending 7A champion, looking for a 4th straight state championship. And should Mount Carmel win this game, it would be the 3rd time since Jordan Lynch took over as head coach that they go 14-0 and win the state championship. All 3 levels of Mount Carmel football went 27-0 in the regular season this year. So they have a phenomenal team now, and there's more talent coming. And the game against Lincoln Way East, that was I was watching that like many other people were, and I was shocked by the fact that there was a running clock in that game. And Mount Carmel offensively, you have to pick your poison. You're going to give something up somewhere. It's just a matter of what you're willing to give up. Between Quentin Burrell, Marshawn Thornton, Jamari Brown at wide receiver, Emmett Dowling, the quarterback, has been putting up monster numbers all year. Madden Wilson and Nathan Samuels. Nate Samuels is a player at running back who's really come on for them over the last several weeks. It'll be interesting to see if they continue to throw the ball as much as they have, if there's going to be some weather involved. But I'm excited to see how Oswego's defense can match up, because I covered that 2nd round game, Oswego Lane Tech, and they ended that game with a pick 6. They dominated the 4th quarter. And looking at these playoffs, Oswego has given up, I want to say, around 10 points a game they haven't given up very many points, and their kicker, Caleb Stumpenhorst, has made some big kicks for them as well in these playoffs. So I think it's going to be a great matchup. And for Mount Carmel, it would be the 17th state championship in program history should they win. So I'm really excited to see how this one shakes out.
Yeah. So Oswego, I mean, I don't know how any of us can say. I don't know how they compete with Mount Carmel. I mean, when they do what they did to Lincoln East, that just kind of really raise an eyebrow. Now, what Oswego needs to do to be successful? Well, it's been pretty successful in the playoffs. I mean, they've given up one score in the second half total in the playoffs. Their defense has been tremendous. So their defense needs to, literally stand on its head against a very, very good Mount Carmel offense. And then they need big plays. I mean, they are not a team that has really driven a ball at 60, 70 yards a lot this year. They rely on the big play, which is very unique to them. They typically are not a big play type team. Mariano Velasco, you touched on, he's a kid. I think he's got 4 or 5 pick sixes this year. He's also caught a handful of touchdowns. Amar Beneer, sophomore running back. They play a lot of 3 running backs, but he's sort of their home run threat. He had a big 63-yarder last week against Lockport. So their defense is going to need to just play spectacular, and they're going to need big plays. And then maybe they need a few things to go their way. Maybe a little snow. Maybe couldn't hurt them all. But we'll see. It's been a great story regardless. I mean, Brian Cooney, himself, he was a linebacker on the 1992 state champion. A lot of parallels to this team in that he was telling me that 1991 was a team that really they thought was loaded, that was going to make a run. It turned out to be 1992. They won state. He was a sophomore coach on their previous state champion in 2003. Now he takes his team back to state. So it's really been a great run for them. And now they get Mount Carmel this week. Soucie, what's your thoughts on that 8A game?
Yeah, it's one of those. You mentioned the Lincoln Way East game a little bit, and that's the last experience that I've had, live with Mount Carmel. And it's an awe-inspiring array of talent that they have for a high school football team. But one of the things that's still sitting with me a couple of weeks later was something Jordan Lynch said after that game. And I agree with what he said. He said, we've played pretty good football, but I still don't think we've played our best football game yet. And I think he's right. I don't think they have. I think there are things that they potentially could clean up and things that they could do better. And if that happens on Saturday night, I don't know what we're going to see, but it's going to be really, really impressive because what they've done so far is very, very impressive. But if they're capable of taking that yet to another level, mercy. That's all I can say.
It's funny. Mount Carmel has had so many great teams over the years. I mean, obviously that kind of goes without saying. I mean, talent-wise, this has got to be right up there.
Oh, I think. I mean, I'm not a scholar of the teams in the 1980s or things like that in that sense.
Right.
But pound for pound, from a talent perspective, I genuinely can't remember a more talented football team in terms of the body, the number of Division I caliber players that are either in this current senior class or will sign at power division schools over the next couple of years. I mean, they've got talent in the sophomore class, the junior class. And like Russ mentioned, other underclassmen programs, there's going to be more coming up the next wave. But the top shelf talent on that roster, I'm not sure I've ever seen a roster that has that much talent inside the state of Illinois' borders.
And one more note I want to make about their defense, because so much gets made of the big plays offensively and scoring a lot of points, and the wide receivers they have Quentin Burrell is a 5-star prospect. Marshawn Thornton could very well be a 5-star prospect by the time he's a senior. He's only a sophomore right now. But defensively, when you have 6'6" Joey Quinn, who was committed to Vanderbilt, I think he's uncommitted right now, but you also have Braden Jones, who's a 4-star 6'4" DN going to USC. You have players like Roman Igwabuki at linebacker, Tavares Harrington at cornerback. These are 4-star guys who we're not just talking Division I FBS players. We're talking Power 4 Division I FBS guys that Mount Carmel has on defense and offense. And I mean, the offensive line, that looking at Claude and Puma, the 6'7" left tackle that's going to be playing at Nebraska. So Mount Carmel, Brother Rice, they played earlier this year. I was really excited to see whether or not Cam McGee would go up against Puma. They were on opposite sides, I think, for most of that game. But I've seen Claude and Puma just steamroll kids and then just lay on them for 10 seconds. They're not going anywhere. So, yeah, I've seen some articles written in Chicago media that this may be the most talented Chicago high school football team ever. And certainly you can make the case that maybe it's the most talented of any high school football team in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing them Saturday. Looking forward to seeing that game as well. Guys, we've been talking for 50 minutes. I think we should get out of here. Any parting thoughts? Russ, your thoughts going into the weekend, and then Soucie?
Yeah, I'll say I'm just excited to go down and cover state championship football for the first time. Working in Rochelle for just over 9 years, I covered some state wrestling. I've covered some state basketball for Ogle County area teams, but this will be my first time covering state championship football, and to go down on Friday and stay in the hotel, cover some more football on Saturday too. I'm excited for the experience and looking forward to watching some awesome football this weekend.
Yeah, Soucie.
We look at these state championship weekends and they're all different. There's always kind of different story threads running along these. And I think we're going to have a common thread. We're going to obviously have a lot of discussion about, the CCL teams and the dominance that they've had. But I think the fun little wrinkle that we're developing is, that weather wrinkle is going to, I think, probably play a role in making this weekend pretty memorable, because I think we have the opportunity to have some very, very good talent, and seeing how they deal with kind of that X factor is especially intriguing to me on Saturday.
No doubt about it. People want to check out our coverage on Friday Night Drive. We have previews of all 8 games. Soucie, thank you for that. Russ says notebooks on the CCL features coming, and we will have coverage of all 8 championship games this weekend. Till then, I think we're going to get out of here. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Everybody have a great week and a great championship weekend.